It was December 10th, 2025 at 2:47 a.m. when a dream so vivid, so violently real that it tore me from sleep with my heart pounding against my rib cage, drove me to the ancient mountaintop overlook 30 miles outside the city, and there, surrounded by the vast pre-dawn darkness punctuated only by a field of stars so dense they looked like silver dust scattered across black velvet, with the wind carrying the sharp scent of pine and cold stone, and the valley below lost in a sea of shadows that seemed to pulse with secrets. Jesus stood at the cliff's edge with his back to me, his silhouette outlined by the faint glow of the coming sunrise, and he turned to me with eyes that held both infinite gentleness and terrifying urgency and said, "They think they're moving forward. They think their busyness is faithfulness, but they've forgotten how to stop. They've forgotten how to hear me. And in 60 seconds, I could change everything if only they would give me 60 seconds." Not everyone who sees this message is meant to see it. Some will scroll past, some will ignore it, but you've been marked. You've been brought here, to this moment, to these words, because there's something Jesus needs you to know, something so urgent that he woke me in the middle of the night, not figuratively but literally, and compelled me to drive through darkness to a place I'd never been, guided by nothing but an overwhelming sense that if I didn't go, if I didn't listen, I would miss something that could never be recovered. Before I go any further, I need to ask you something. I need you to do something right now. Leave your prayer request in the comments. Whatever you're carrying, whatever burden is crushing you, whatever question is haunting you at 2 a.m. when you can't sleep, write it down. Because what I'm about to share with you isn't just my story. It's yours. It's ours. And Jesus is moving through these comments, through these prayers, in ways that will undo you. And if you're someone who believes, truly believes that Jesus is still speaking, still moving, still breaking into our ordinary moments with extraordinary truth, then subscribe to this channel, click that notification bell. Because what I'm sharing here isn't for the casual observer, it's for the desperate, it's for the hungry, it's for those who are willing to have everything they thought they knew about faith turned inside out. Some of you know me from The Chosen. You've watched me portray Jesus for 7 seasons. You've seen me study his words, embody his mannerisms, attempt to capture even a fraction of his presence. And I want you to know something. Nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what happened on that mountaintop. All the script preparation, all the theological consultation, all the prayer and fasting I've done to honor this role, it all became like dust in the wind compared to standing in the actual presence of the one I've been portraying. This is real. This is not a script. This is not acting. This is my life, and it's about to become yours. Let me take you back to that moment, to 2:47 a.m. on December 10th, 2025. I was asleep in my bed, my wife beside me, the house quiet except for the soft hum of the heater and the occasional creak of settling wood. And then, like a thunderclap inside my skull, I was somewhere else. Not physically, not yet, but in that place between sleep and waking where visions feel more real than reality. I saw myself standing on a mountain I'd never seen before. The air was thin and cold, burning my lungs with each breath. Stars surrounded me on all sides, not above me, but around me, as if I stood at the very threshold of heaven. And in front of me, at the edge of a sheer cliff that dropped away into infinite darkness, stood a figure. Even before he turned, I knew. The way you know your own heartbeat, the way you know your own name. He turned, and his face. God help me, how do I describe his face? It was the face I've studied for years, tried to reflect, tried to honor, but it was also completely other. More real than real, more present than present. His eyes held galaxies, his expression held both welcome and warning, and he said, "Come to me, now, not in your dream, now." I woke, gasping. My wife stirred, asked if I was okay. I couldn't answer. I was already pulling on jeans, a heavy jacket, boots. She asked where I was going. I didn't have an answer except, I have to go right now. The drive was surreal. My hands shook on the steering wheel. I'd never been to this place before, but I knew exactly where to go. Every turn felt predestined. The roads were empty. Who else is driving at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday? And the darkness pressed against my windows like a living thing. I pulled off the highway onto a narrow road that wound up the mountainside. Gravel crunched under my tires. The headlights caught pine trees that seemed to lean in, watching. Up and up I drove, my ears popping from the elevation, until the road simply ended at a small gravel parking area. I got out of the car, and the cold hit me like a physical blow. It had to be below freezing. My breath came out in clouds that the wind immediately tore away. The wind, it was constant, flowing over the mountain peak with a sound like rushing water, like whispered voices, like the breath of God Himself. I could see the overlook about 50 yards away, exactly as it had been in the vision. A wooden safety railing marked the cliff's edge. Beyond it, nothing but air and stars and the vast sleeping valley below. And there, at the railing, with his back to me again, stood Jesus. I want you to understand something. I wasn't watching this from outside myself. This wasn't a vision in the traditional sense. I was there. My boots crunched on the frozen ground. The wind cut through my jacket and made my eyes water. The scent of pine and stone and the clean emptiness of high altitude filled my lungs. This was happening. I walked toward him slowly. Each step felt momentous, like approaching the edge of the world. The stars overhead were so bright I could see my shadow cast on the ground. Multiple shadows from multiple stars, all overlapping. Jesus? My voice came out hoarse, barely audible over the wind. He didn't turn immediately. When he finally did, I saw his face fully for the first time, and I fell to my knees. Not because I decided to, not because it seemed like the appropriate religious response, but because my legs simply gave out under the weight of his presence. He looked at me with such love, such fierce, uncompromising, devastating love that I started weeping. Right there on the frozen ground, I wept like a child. "Jonathan," he said, and his voice was somehow both quiet and thunderous, somehow audible despite the wind, somehow inside my head and outside it simultaneously. "Do you know why I brought you here?" I shook my head, unable to speak. "Because you've been running," he said. "Just like they are. Just like all of them are. Running and running and running, calling it faithfulness, calling it service, calling it obedience, but never stopping, never pausing, never giving me even 60 seconds of true, undivided attention." He gestured to the valley below, and as he did, something impossible happened. The darkness began to lift, not like sunrise, but like a veil being pulled back, and I could see the valley below populated with millions of lights. At first I thought they were houses, cities, street lights, but as I looked closer, I realized each light was a person. "Watch," Jesus said. And I watched. I saw the lights moving frantically, rushing, darting, spinning, each person surrounded by a corona of activity: phones, screens, notifications, appointments, obligations, distractions. The lights blurred with motion. "They pray," Jesus said, and his voice carried an ache that broke my heart. "They pray while scrolling. They pray while planning their next task. They pray while their minds are already 3 steps ahead. They give me their words, but not their presence. They give me their requests, but not their attention. They give me everything except the one thing I want most." "What do you want?" I whispered. 60 seconds, he said. Just 60 seconds of complete stillness, complete presence, no agenda, no requests, no shopping list of needs and wants, just them and me, just presence and presence. He turned to face the valley again, and I struggled to my feet, moving to stand beside him at the railing. The wind howled around us, but somehow I wasn't cold anymore. "Do you know what I could do in 60 seconds?" he asked. "Do you know what I could heal, what I could restore, what I could reveal, what I could transform, if they would just stop, if they would just pause, if they would just give me 60 seconds of complete, undivided, undistracted attention?" As he spoke, I saw it happen. Down in the Valley of Lights, one light suddenly stopped moving. Just one, among millions. It became still, and as it did, Jesus leaned forward slightly, his full attention focusing on that single point of light, and I watched as the light began to change, growing brighter, clearer, stronger. The frantic corona of activity around it began to settle, to organize, to make sense. "There," Jesus said softly, with such tenderness it made me want to weep again. "There is one who has learned to pause. Watch what I do." He raised his hand slightly, and from where we stood, impossibly, miraculously, a beam of light shot down into the valley, connecting directly to that single still point, and I saw transformation happen in real time. I saw healing flood into that life. I saw clarity replace confusion. I saw peace descend like snow. 60 seconds, Jesus said again. That's all it took. 60 seconds of true presence, and I could reach them. I could touch them. I could move. Then he turned to me, and his eyes held mine with an intensity that made me forget how to breathe. "But the others," he said, and now his voice carried grief so profound it seemed to make the mountain itself tremble. The others are moving too fast. They're too busy, too distracted, too convinced that motion equals faithfulness. And I'm calling to them every single day, every single moment. I'm calling to them, but they can't hear me over the noise. They can't hear me through the static of their schedules and their plans and their endless doing. I looked back at the valley, at the millions of lights still spinning, still rushing, still moving at frantic speeds, and I saw Jesus reaching toward them, saw him calling, saw him waiting, but they were moving too fast to notice. The church has taught them to pray without ceasing, Jesus said, but I never meant for that to become praying without pausing. I never meant for that to become constant words without any listening. I never meant for that to become noise instead of communion. He moved closer to the edge of the overlook, and I followed. The valley below seemed to stretch into infinity. "There's a woman in Ohio," Jesus said suddenly. "Right now, at this very moment, she's lying awake, staring at her ceiling, wondering why I feel distant. She prays every day, multiple times a day. She reads her Bible. She serves at her church. She does everything she's been taught to do, but she hasn't stopped, truly stopped in 3 years. Not for 60 seconds. Not for one single minute has she given me her complete, undivided attention with no agenda, no request, no need to accomplish something." As he spoke, one of the lights in the valley seemed to brighten, and I knew somehow that I was seeing her pain, her confusion, her desperate longing for connection with the divine. "If she would stop," Jesus said, and his voice cracked with emotion. "If she would just give me 60 seconds, 60 seconds of complete stillness, of just being in my presence, not asking for anything, not trying to accomplish anything, just being, I could show her why I've felt distant. I could show her the walls she's built with her own busyness. I could tear them down in an instant." He turned to me again. "That's why I brought you here, Jonathan. That's why I woke you at 2:47 in the morning and called you to this mountaintop, because I need someone to tell them. I need someone to break through the noise and deliver this message. Pause for 60 seconds. Just pause." The wind picked up nearly strong enough to knock me off balance. I gripped the railing and felt the rough wood under my palms, felt the splinters and the cold metal of the bolts. "But they won't want to hear it," Jesus continued. "They'll resist. They'll rationalize. They'll say they don't have time. They'll say they're already praying. They'll say they're already faithful. And all the while, they'll be slowly dying of spiritual starvation while standing in front of a feast, because they won't stop moving long enough to sit down and eat." I found my voice finally. "Why 60 seconds? Why not more? Why not longer?" He smiled then, and it was like sunrise breaking over the valley. "Because 60 seconds is short enough that they can't make excuses. It's not an hour of prayer. It's not a 30-minute devotional. It's 60 seconds. 1 minute. Everyone has 1 minute. But it's also long enough. If they truly stop, truly pause, truly give me their complete attention, for me to move, for me to speak, for me to change everything." He reached out and put his hand on my shoulder, and the touch sent warmth flooding through my entire body. "Go back," he said. Tell them that Jesus says pause for 60 seconds. That's the message. That's what they need to hear. Not a new program, not a new technique, not a new spiritual practice to add to their already overwhelming list. Just this: pause, stop, be still for 60 seconds, and watch what I do. The sky behind him was beginning to lighten. Dawn was coming. The stars were starting to fade, giving way to the deep blue of pre-sunrise. "But listen to me carefully," Jesus said, and his tone shifted, became more urgent. "Not everyone who hears this message will receive it. Some will scroll past. Some will dismiss it as too simple. Some will add it to their mental list of things to try someday and never actually do it. But you," he pointed at me, and then beyond me, and I knew he was pointing at whoever would eventually watch this, whoever would eventually hear these words. "You have been marked. You have been chosen to receive this. The very fact that you're still reading, still listening, still here, that's not an accident. That's my hand on your life. That's my voice calling to you specifically." I was trembling now, and not from the cold. "What if they don't listen? What if they don't stop?" His face grew grave. "Then they'll continue as they are, busy, faithful, active, serving, but slowly drifting further from me, wondering why I feel distant, wondering why their prayers feel empty, wondering why they're exhausted in the service of a God who promised rest. And that," his voice broke, that breaks my heart in ways you cannot imagine. The sun broke over the eastern horizon then, a sliver of gold that grew rapidly, spreading light across the valley below. The millions of lights began to fade in the growing dawn, but I could still sense them, still feel the frantic energy of countless lives moving too fast to truly live. "Come back tomorrow night," Jesus said. "Same time. I have more to show you. This is only the beginning." And then, between one heartbeat and the next, he was gone. I stood alone at the overlook, gripping the railing, the wind still howling around me, the sun rising behind me, casting my long shadow out over the valley. I don't know how long I stood there, long enough for the sun to fully rise, long enough for the cold to seep back into my bones, long enough to wonder if I'd lost my mind. But I knew with absolute certainty that what had happened was real, that Jesus had met me here, that he had given me a message that needed to be shared. So here I am, sharing it, delivering it to you. Jesus says, pause for 60 seconds. This message is for you. Tomorrow night, I'll tell you what happened when I went back to that mountaintop, what Jesus showed me next, the deeper revelations about what happens when we refuse to pause, the shocking truth about how our busyness is actually a form of hiding. But for now, I need you to do something. I need you to try it right now, before you click away, before you move on to the next video, before you let this moment pass. Pause for 60 seconds. Close your eyes if you need to. Put your phone down, turn off the TV, step away from the computer, and just be still in his presence. Don't pray, don't ask for anything, don't try to accomplish anything. Just be present with the one who is always present with you. 60 seconds. Starting now. I didn't sleep that entire day. How could I? How could anyone sleep after standing in the physical presence of Jesus Christ, after hearing his voice carried on mountain wind, after watching him reach toward a valley of souls spinning too fast to notice his outstretched hand? I went through the motions, came home, showered, sat at the breakfast table while my wife asked me questions I couldn't properly answer. How do you explain the unexplainable? How do you put the infinite into words that fit inside a finite conversation? Something happened was all I could manage, something I need to go back to tonight. She looked at me with concern and something else, recognition maybe. She's watched me portray Jesus for years. She knows the weight of it, the responsibility of it. But she also saw something in my eyes that morning that she'd never seen before. A wildness, a terror, a joy so profound it looked like grief. "Go," she said simply. "Do what you need to do." I tried to rest. I lay in bed as afternoon sunlight streamed through the curtains, creating patterns on the ceiling that seemed to pulse with meaning. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that valley of lights. I saw the millions of souls spinning, rushing, too busy for the one who made them. And I saw that single light that had stopped, had paused, and how Jesus had leaned forward with such focus, such intensity, such desperate love to reach them. 60 seconds. That's all it had taken. By the time 2 a.m. arrived on December 11th, I was already dressed and in my car, driving back up that mountain road. The darkness felt different this time, less ominous, more expectant, like the night itself was holding its breath. When I pulled into the same gravel parking area, I could see him already. Even from 50 yards away, even in the absolute darkness of a moonless night, I could see him standing at that overlook, his form outlined by a light that had no earthly source. I got out of the car, and the cold was even more intense than the night before. The wind had picked up, roaring through the pine trees with a sound like ocean waves. But beneath the wind I could hear something else, a low hum, almost subsonic, that seemed to come from the earth itself. "You came back," Jesus said as I approached. He still faced the valley, but I knew he was aware of every step I took, every breath I drew. "You told me to," I said, coming to stand beside him at the railing. My hands found the same spot I'd gripped the night before, and the wood felt familiar now, worn smooth by weather and time. "Many hear my voice," he said quietly. "Few obey it." The valley below was visible again, despite the darkness. That same supernatural clarity had descended, allowing me to see the carpet of light stretching to the horizon. If anything, there were more than the night before, millions upon millions, each one a human soul, each one spinning in their orbit of obligations and distractions. "Look closer tonight," Jesus said. "I want to show you something you didn't see before." He gestured, and my vision seemed to zoom in, focusing on a cluster of lights in what I somehow knew was a suburban neighborhood. As I watched, I began to see more detail. Each light wasn't just a person, it was a life, a story, a web of relationships and responsibilities and dreams and fears all bound together. There, Jesus said, pointing to one light that was moving in particularly frantic patterns. That's Marcus. He's 34 years old, married, 2 children. He works 60 hours a week at a job that's slowly killing his soul, but he tells himself he's providing for his family. He tells himself that's what faithfulness looks like. As Jesus spoke, I could see Marcus more clearly, not with my physical eyes, but with some deeper sense. I could feel his exhaustion, his quiet desperation, the way he'd convinced himself that this grinding pace was necessary, was noble, was godly. He prays every morning in his car during his commute, Jesus continued. 22 minutes every single day without fail. He's been doing it for 3 years. He thinks I'm pleased with his consistency. And I am. I'm pleased that he thinks of me, that he talks to me. But Jonathan, he turned to look at me, and his eyes were bright with unshed tears. He's never once stopped talking long enough to let me respond. Never once paused to ask what I think about the path he's on. Never once given me 60 seconds of silence to show him that the life he's building is a cage disguised as a kingdom. The wind howled around us, and I watched Marcus's light continue its frantic spinning. What would happen if he paused? I asked. What would you show him? Jesus raised his hand, and suddenly I was seeing a vision within the vision. I saw Marcus sitting in his car, but instead of immediately launching into his morning prayer, he sat in silence. Just 60 seconds of complete stillness, hands resting on the steering wheel, eyes closed, no words, no agenda, no requests. And in that silence, Jesus leaned in close. So close I could see his breath on Marcus's cheek. So close that the distance between divine and human became almost nothing. I would show him the job offer he deleted last month without praying about it, Jesus said softly. The one that paid less, but would have given him his life back. Would have let him be home for dinner. Would have let him watch his children grow up instead of just hearing about it on weekends. I tried to speak to him about it. I tried to bring it to his mind during his prayers, but he was too busy telling me his plans to hear me offering him mine. I watched as the vision Marcus sat in that silence, and slowly, so slowly, his face began to change. Tension I hadn't even realized was there began to ease. His shoulders dropped, his jaw unclenched, and tears started sliding down his cheeks. That's what 60 seconds looks like, Jesus said. That's what happens when someone finally stops moving, stops talking, stops trying to manage their life into submission and just pauses, just gives me room to move. The vision faded and we were back on the mountaintop, the real Marcus still spinning in his frantic pattern below. Will he pause? I asked. Will he ever stop? That depends, Jesus said, on whether people like you are willing to tell him that he needs to. That depends on whether my church will stop celebrating busyness as spirituality and start recognizing it as the bondage it actually is. He moved along the railing and I followed. The wooden barrier beneath my hands was rough with age, and I could feel the cold metal bolts every few feet, anchoring it to the stone. Below us, the drop was dizzying, hundreds of feet of empty air before the rocky slope began. Look there, Jesus said, pointing to another section of the valley. Do you see that cluster of lights moving in synchronized patterns? I saw them, dozens of lights, maybe hundreds, all moving in similar ways, forming a kind of constellation in the darkness. That's a church, he said. A good church, solid teaching, genuine hearts. They love me, they truly do. But they've created a culture where stillness is seen as laziness, where silence is interpreted as disconnection, where constant activity is the measure of spiritual vitality. As he spoke, I could see the pattern more clearly. Every light in that cluster was moving, busy, engaged in endless programs and services and activities, prayer meetings and Bible studies and outreach events and committee meetings and worship practices and volunteer schedules. All of it good, all of it well-intentioned, all of it slowly suffocating the very people it was meant to liberate. They've forgotten the Mary spirit, Jesus said, and his voice carried both frustration and deep sadness. They're all Martha now, worried and upset about many things when only one thing is needed, just to sit at my feet, just to be present, just to pause their doing long enough to remember their being. The temperature seemed to drop even further. My breath came out in thick clouds that the wind snatched away. I could feel ice crystals forming in my beard, on my eyelashes. What would happen if that whole church paused? I asked. If everyone altogether just stopped for 60 seconds? Jesus closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, they were blazing with intensity. Do you really want to see? Before I could answer, he touched my forehead with one finger, and suddenly I was falling. Not physically, but spiritually, mentally, falling down through the air, through the darkness, until I was standing in the middle of that church on a Sunday morning. The sanctuary was packed, hundreds of people. The worship band was setting up. People were chatting, greeting each other, finding their seats. The energy was good, warm, friendly, enthusiastic, but underneath it I could sense something else, a current of exhaustion, of people pushing through their weariness to show up, to participate, to maintain the appearance of spiritual vitality. The pastor stepped to the pulpit. A good man, I could sense that immediately, sincere, devoted. He loved these people. He loved Jesus, but he was tired, so desperately tired. Oh, he opened his mouth to begin the service, but then, impossibly, he stopped. He stood there in silence. 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15. The congregation began to shift uncomfortably. Something was wrong. This wasn't part of the program. I need us to do something, the pastor finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. Something we've never done before. I need us to just stop for 60 seconds. No music, no prayer, no words, just silence, just presence, just us and Jesus, with nothing in between. The discomfort in the room was palpable. This wasn't what people had come for. This wasn't the energetic, uplifting service they expected. But the pastor closed his eyes and bowed his head, and slowly, reluctantly, the congregation followed. 60 seconds of complete silence, and into that silence Jesus walked. I could see him moving through the aisles, even though no one else could. He moved from person to person, and wherever he stopped, whatever he touched, transformation began. Walls crumbled, masks fell away. The exhaustion that people had been hiding, even from themselves, suddenly became visible, but so did his presence, his comfort, his rest. A woman in the third row began to weep, not quiet tears, but deep, body-shaking sobs. She'd been holding together for so long, pushing through for so many months, and 60 seconds of stillness had finally given her permission to fall apart. A man in the back stood up suddenly, face in his hands, shoulders trembling. He'd been running from a conviction for weeks, drowning it in activity, in service, in busy work for the kingdom. 60 seconds of silence, and he couldn't run anymore. A teenager in the youth section felt warmth spread through her chest. The first time in months she'd actually felt something during a church service besides obligation and boredom. 60 seconds, and suddenly Jesus was real again. All over the sanctuary, hearts were breaking open, defenses were falling, the facades of having it all together were crumbling, and into the cracks Jesus was pouring himself like water into parched ground. The 60 seconds ended, but the silence continued. The pastor looked up with tears streaming down his face. Half the congregation was weeping. The other half looked stunned, shaken, like they'd just woken from a long sleep. "What?" the pastor's voice cracked. "What just happened?" And then I was back on the mountaintop, gasping, gripping the railing to keep from falling. Jesus stood beside me, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "That's what could happen," he said quietly. "In any church, in any gathering, in any life. If they would just pause, if they would just give me 60 seconds to move." I was shaking. Whether from cold or emotion or the intensity of what I'd just witnessed, I couldn't tell. "So why doesn't it happen? Why don't we do that?" "Because you're afraid," Jesus said simply. "All of you. You're afraid of silence because you're afraid of what you might hear in it. You're afraid of stillness because you're afraid of what you might feel. You're afraid to stop because you're afraid you might realize how tired you actually are, how empty you've become, how far you've drifted while still maintaining all the right motions." He turned to face me fully, taking both my shoulders in his hands. The touch was electric, warm despite the freezing air. "Jonathan, listen to me. This is important. The enemy doesn't need to pull people away from me with obvious sin anymore. That's too detectable, too easy to recognize and resist. No, he's much more subtle now. He keeps them busy. He keeps them moving. He keeps them so focused on serving me that they never actually spend time with me. He turns faithfulness into a treadmill, and they run and run and run until they collapse, wondering why they feel so distant from the God they've given their whole lives to. A gust of wind hit us, so strong I had to lean into it to keep my balance. The pine trees behind us thrashed and groaned. The stars overhead seemed to pulse in rhythm with my heartbeat. I need you to understand the urgency of this, Jesus continued. This isn't a nice suggestion. This isn't a helpful tip for a slightly better prayer life. This is a rescue mission. I am trying to rescue my people from a form of bondage they don't even recognize as bondage. I am trying to call them back to the simplicity of just being with me before all the doing for me. He released my shoulders and turned back to the valley. Tomorrow night, he said, I'm going to show you what happens to those who refuse to pause. I'm going to show you the consequences of constant motion, constant distraction, constant busyness, and it's going to break your heart the way it breaks mine every single day. The sky was beginning to lighten again, that same pre-dawn glow creeping over the eastern horizon. I'd been here for hours, though it felt like minutes. Can I ask you something? I said quietly. He nodded. Why me? Why did you choose me to deliver this message? There are better speakers, more influential pastors, people with bigger platforms. Because you know what it's like to be seen, he interrupted. You've spent years being recognized as me, being stopped on the street, being asked to pray with people who see my face when they look at you. You know the weight of representation, and I need someone who understands that weight to carry this message, someone who knows that when they speak about me, people listen differently, people lean in. He smiled then, sad and knowing. And also because you know how easy it is to become busy with the work of representing me instead of being present with me. You've felt that tension, you've struggled with it, that makes you the right messenger. The sun broke the horizon, and light flooded across the valley. The supernatural clarity began to fade, the millions of lights disappearing in the growing dawn. But I could still feel them, all those souls, spinning and rushing and moving too fast to hear the voice calling them to stop. Go home, Jesus said. Rest if you can, though I suspect you won't. And come back tomorrow night. 2 a.m., same place. I'll be waiting. I'll be here, I promised. He looked at me one more time, his eyes holding mine with an intensity that burned. Make sure they understand, Jonathan. Make sure whoever watches this, whoever hears these words, understands that this message is for them, specifically, personally, that I'm not speaking to some generic audience. I'm speaking to them, right now, right here, this moment. And then he was gone, and I was alone on the mountaintop as sunrise painted the sky in shades of gold and rose and violet. I drove home in a daze, came inside, sat at my computer, and started writing this because he's right. This message is for you, not for some abstract audience, not for people out there, for you, the person reading these words right now. Jesus is calling you to pause for 60 seconds, not as a spiritual exercise to add to your already overwhelming list, not as another thing to accomplish, another box to check, but as a rescue rope thrown to someone drowning in obligation. You're tired. I know you are. Even if you won't admit it to anyone else, even if you won't admit it to yourself, you're exhausted. You've been running so long, serving so faithfully, doing so much in his name, and somehow in all that doing, you've lost the simple joy of being with him. 60 seconds, that's all he's asking for. 60 seconds of complete stillness. No requests, no agenda, no trying to accomplish anything. Just you and him, just presence and presence. Try it again. Right now, before you move on, before you scroll to the next thing, before you let this moment pass. 60 seconds. Close your eyes, put everything down, and just be still in his presence. I'll be back tomorrow night with part 3. With what Jesus showed me about the consequences of refusing to pause, about what happens when we stay in constant motion until we can no longer hear his voice at all. But for now, pause. Just pause. He's waiting for you. He's been waiting for you, and 60 seconds might change everything. I didn't go home after the second night. I know that sounds crazy. I know it sounds obsessive, maybe even unhealthy. But after Jesus said he'd meet me again at 2 a.m., after watching him walk through that church in the vision, after feeling the weight of his urgency pressing down on me like a physical thing, I couldn't leave. I couldn't go back to normal life and pretend I was the same person I'd been 3 days ago. So I stayed. I parked my car in that gravel lot and waited. I called my wife, tried to explain. She was worried. I could hear it in her voice, but she also understood that something monumental was happening. Just be safe, she said, and come home when you can. I spent December 11th on that mountain top, watched the sun climb across the sky, felt the temperature rise from freezing to merely cold. The overlook looked different in daylight, less mystical, more ordinary, just wood and stone and a spectacular view. A few hikers came by, nodded hello, took pictures, and left. They had no idea that this place had become holy ground, that the air here still vibrated with divine presence. I prayed. I walked the perimeter of the overlook. I sat with my back against a pine tree and read scripture on my phone until the battery died, and mostly, I waited, anticipating and dreading what Jesus would show me on this third night, because I knew, the way you know a storm is coming by the pressure in the air, that tonight would be different, more intense, more devastating. He'd said he would show me the consequences of refusing to pause, and everything in me both needed and feared to see it. The sun set in a blaze of orange and purple, the temperature plummeting as darkness descended. By 1 a.m. on December 12th, it had started to snow. Not gently, violently. Wind-driven snow that came in horizontal sheets, stinging my face, accumulating rapidly on the ground. The wind had become a roar, shaking the trees, howling over the cliff's edge like something alive and angry. I should have been freezing, should have been in danger of hypothermia, but I wasn't cold anymore. As 2 a.m. approached, warmth began to build around me as if an invisible fire had been kindled, and then he was there. Not gradually this time, not a figure appearing in the distance. One moment I was alone in the storm, and the next Jesus stood directly in front of me, so close I could have reached out and touched him. His presence was overwhelming, more solid, more real, more intense than either of the previous nights. His face was terrible with grief. "Come with me," he said, taking my hand. His grip was firm, warm, anchoring me as the world seemed to tilt and spin. "You need to see this, all of it, no matter how much it hurts." The mountaintop disappeared, or rather, we disappeared from it. Suddenly we were standing in the valley, in the midst of those millions of spinning lights. But now I could see them up close. Now I could see the reality behind each one, and it was horrifying. "This is what constant motion looks like from my perspective," Jesus said quietly. "This is what happens when my people forget how to pause." The first person we approached was a woman, mid-40s, sitting at her kitchen table at 2 a.m. with her laptop open and her Bible beside it. She was preparing a Bible study lesson for the women's group she led. Her eyes were bloodshot with exhaustion, coffee mug at her elbow, cold and forgotten. "Her name is Jennifer," Jesus said. "She's been in ministry for 18 years. She loves me deeply. She serves me faithfully. She hasn't stopped moving in 7 months." I watched Jennifer type, delete, retype. She kept glancing at her Bible, but I could see, somehow I could see, that the words weren't really penetrating. She was reading with the surface of her mind, while the deeper parts spun with anxiety about whether the lesson would be good enough, whether the women would be blessed, whether she was doing enough. "Watch what happens when I try to reach her," Jesus said. He moved close to Jennifer, so close he was nearly embracing her from behind. He bent down, his mouth near her ear, and he spoke. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see his lips moving, could see the intensity of his focus as he tried to break through to her consciousness. Jennifer paused. For just a second, she stopped typing. Her hand went to her chest, right over her heart, and her face shifted, like she was on the verge of hearing something important. But then her phone buzzed, a text message. She picked it up, read it, responded. The moment was gone. Jesus straightened slowly, his expression shattered with sorrow, and Jennifer went back to typing, completely unaware that she'd just missed a divine encounter. 7 times tonight I've tried to speak to her, Jesus said. 7 times she's almost heard me. But something always interrupts, always. And it's not the devil placing those interruptions, Jonathan. It's her own inability to create even 60 seconds of uninterrupted space for me to reach her. He gestured, and we moved to another light, another person. A young man this time, sitting in his car in a parking lot, praying aloud with desperate intensity. He was praying about a decision. I could feel the weight of it, the genuine desire to hear God's will. "His name is David," Jesus said, "and I've been trying to answer his prayer for 3 weeks. But look." I watched as David prayed, words tumbling out rapidly, urgently. He finished one prayer and immediately started another, barely paused for breath. He was asking, but never waiting, never creating space for response. Jesus stood outside the car window, one hand pressed against the glass, and I could see tears sliding down his face. "I'm right here," he whispered. "The answer he needs. I'm holding it. I'm ready to give it, but he won't stop talking long enough to receive it. We moved through the valley, person after person, light after light, and the pattern was the same. People praying without pausing, people serving without stopping, people running themselves into exhaustion in the name of faithfulness, while Jesus stood right beside them, trying desperately to break through, to offer rest, to offer clarity, to offer himself, and being unable to because there was no space, no silence, no stillness. A pastor burning out while preparing his fourth sermon of the week, unable to hear Jesus saying, "You're not responsible for saving these people. I am." A missionary overseas, pushing through exhaustion and culture shock and loneliness, unable to hear Jesus saying, "Come away with me and rest." Even I withdrew to lonely places. Even I paused. A worship leader practicing for Sunday, running through the songs over and over, trying to create the perfect atmosphere for encounter, unable to hear Jesus saying, "I'm not in the production. I'm in the pause between the notes. I'm in the silence you're trying so hard to fill." A college student cramming for exams while trying to maintain her prayer life, her Bible reading, her small group attendance, unable to hear Jesus saying, "You're trying to earn my approval. You already have it. Stop. Just stop and let me love you." On and on it went. Hundreds of examples, thousands, each one a knife to the heart, each one showing people who genuinely loved Jesus, who were sincerely trying to follow him, but who had forgotten or had never learned how to simply be with him. "This is the crisis no one is talking about," Jesus said, his voice raw with emotion. "This is the emergency that everyone is too busy to notice. My people are dying of thirst while standing in the river because they won't stop moving long enough to drink." The snow was falling harder now, even in this valley vision. The wind was howling. And then Jesus turned to me, and his face, God help me, his face was terrible. "Now I'm going to show you what happens when this continues," he said, "when the refusal to pause becomes a way of life, when the constant motion becomes so ingrained that they can no longer hear my voice at all, even when they want to." He touched my forehead again, and suddenly we were moving forward in time. Days, weeks, months blurring past like a time lapse. I saw Jennifer, the Bible study leader, 6 months later. She'd had what everyone called a crisis of faith. Suddenly, inexplicably, she felt nothing when she prayed. God seemed absent, silent, unreachable. She couldn't understand it. She was doing everything right, all the same things she'd always done. But the connection was gone. What she didn't know, what she couldn't see, was that she'd trained herself to never truly stop, never truly listen. She'd conditioned herself to constant motion, and now, when she desperately needed to hear God's voice, she no longer knew how to be still enough to hear it. I saw her eventually walking away from ministry, not from Jesus, she still believed, but from active service, too exhausted, too burned out, too confused by the silence she couldn't understand was of her own making. I saw David, the young man in the parking lot, make his decision without ever receiving the guidance he'd been praying for. It was the wrong decision, not sinful, not disastrous, but wrong for him. A path that would lead to years of frustration and wondering why God had led him into something that felt so misaligned with his gifts and calling. Except God hadn't led him there. He'd run ahead without waiting for direction, mistaking his own anxiety-driven impulse for divine guidance. I saw the pastor collapse, literal physical collapse during a Sunday service, his body giving out under the weight of exhaustion and stress. Months of recovery. A congregation confused and hurt, wondering why their leader had been so weak, never understanding that he'd been strong for far too long, pushing through when he should have paused, serving when he should have rested. I saw the missionary return home after a breakdown, feeling like a failure, never knowing that if she'd given Jesus 60 seconds of true presence each day, he would have sustained her, would have poured into her the strength and peace she so desperately needed. I saw the worship leader become cynical. The music that had once been worship became performance. The passion that had once been genuine became manufactured, and she couldn't understand why, couldn't trace it back to the moment when the doing for Jesus had eclipsed the being with Jesus. I saw the college student achieve everything she'd worked for, good grades, good job, good Christian life, and still feel empty, still feel like something essential was missing. She'd spent so many years checking boxes, accomplishing tasks, moving from one goal to the next, that she'd never developed an actual relationship with the God she claimed to serve. "Stop," I gasped. "Please stop, I can't." But Jesus didn't stop. He showed me more. Church after church, life after life. Generations of believers who had been taught to work for him but never to rest with him, who had been trained in service but never in simple presence, who could quote scripture about resting in God but had no idea how to actually do it. I saw marriages crumble because both partners were too busy serving God to actually be present with each other. I saw children walk away from faith because all they'd ever seen was their parents' exhaustion in the name of Jesus, and they wanted no part of a God who demanded such relentless striving. I saw churches split because people were too tired and stretched too thin to have the patience, grace, and wisdom to work through conflict. I saw leaders fall into sin, not because they didn't love God, but because they were so depleted, so empty, so desperate for something to fill the void that their busyness had created, that they reached for cheap substitutes for the presence they'd been denying themselves. "Enough!" I shouted, falling to my knees in the snow. "Please, enough!" The vision stopped. We were back on the mountaintop. The storm was raging around us, wind and snow creating a wall of white. But Jesus knelt beside me, his hand on my back as I wept into my hands. "This is what I see every day," he said softly. "This is my church. These are my people. And they're killing themselves in my name while I stand beside them begging them to just stop, just pause, just give me 60 seconds to remind them who they are, whose they are, and what this journey is actually supposed to be about." I couldn't speak, could barely breathe. The weight of what I'd seen was crushing. "It doesn't have to be this way," Jesus continued. "That's why I brought you here. That's why I'm showing you this, because it doesn't have to be this way. 60 seconds. That's all it takes to begin breaking the pattern. 60 seconds of true pause, true stillness, true presence, and I can start healing what's been broken. I can start restoring what's been lost. I can start reminding them that I never asked for their exhaustion. I asked for their hearts." He helped me to my feet, steady me as the wind tried to knock me down. The snow was inches deep now, the cold finally penetrating, making me shiver violently. "Do you know what the tragedy is?" Jesus asked. "The real tragedy? It's that they think this is what I want. They think their exhaustion is faithfulness. They think their busyness honors me. They think that to stop, to pause, to rest would be disobedience or laziness or lack of commitment, and all the while I'm crying out, 'Come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest.'" They memorize that verse. They can quote it, but they never actually do it. He moved to the overlook's edge, and I followed. Below us, the valley was invisible behind curtains of snow, but I could still sense those millions of lights, still spinning, still rushing. "In 3 nights, I've shown you the problem," Jesus said. "Tomorrow night, the final night, I'll show you the solution. Not just the concept of pausing for 60 seconds, but the practical reality of it, how to actually do it, how to teach others to do it, how to begin shifting from a culture of exhaustion to a culture of presence." Lightning flashed, impossible lightning in a snowstorm, illuminating Jesus' face for an instant. And in that flash, I saw both devastating sadness and unshakable hope. "This message has to go out," he said, "not as a suggestion, not as a nice addition to their existing spiritual practices, but as an urgent rescue mission, as a declaration that I am calling my people back to the simplicity of just being with me, 60 seconds at a time." He turned to face me fully. "Go home now, sleep if you can, and come back tomorrow night, 2 a.m. I'll have final instructions for you, final words that need to be spoken, and then—" He smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through storm clouds. "Then we unleash this message and watch what I do with it." The snow suddenly stopped, just stopped, as if someone had flipped a switch. The wind died, the clouds parted, revealing a sky full of stars that seemed to burn with unusual brightness. "One more night," Jesus said, "and then you take this to the world." He was gone, and I was alone on the mountaintop, surrounded by pristine snow that glowed in the starlight, with tear tracks frozen on my face, and my heart simultaneously broken and burning with purpose. I drove home through empty streets, fell into bed fully clothed, and dreamed of millions of lights, one by one, stopping their frantic spinning, becoming still, and in that stillness, Jesus reaching them. Finally reaching them. Tomorrow night, I'll tell you what he said, the practical steps, the challenge he's issuing, the deadline he's set, the transformation he's promising for those who will actually do this. But for now, today, right now, as you read this, pause. Because you've just seen what happens when we don't. You've just witnessed the slow-motion tragedy of a church too busy to be with the one they claim to serve. 60 seconds. Stop everything. Put your phone down. Close your eyes. And just be with him, not for him, not serving him, not asking from him, just with him. Start now. Start today. Start this moment. Because the consequences of not pausing are too devastating to ignore any longer. I slept for 14 hours straight. When I finally woke on the afternoon of December 12th, my wife was sitting on the edge of the bed, watching me with an expression that was equal parts concern and awe. "You were talking in your sleep," she said quietly. "Saying names I've never heard. Jennifer, David, Marcus. You kept saying they need to stop. They need to stop." I sat up slowly, my body aching like I'd run a marathon. Everything from the past 3 nights came flooding back with such clarity, such intensity, that I had to close my eyes against it. "It's real," I whispered. "Everything I've been seeing, it's real. And tonight is the final night." She took my hand. "Then you need to eat. You need to be strong for whatever he's going to show you." She was right. I forced myself through the motions of normalcy, showered, ate, tried to engage with the present moment. But my mind was already on that mountaintop, already anticipating what Jesus would reveal in this final encounter. As midnight approached, that familiar pull began, that magnetic sense that I needed to go, needed to be there. I kissed my wife, promised I'd be safe, and drove through the darkness one more time. The mountain road was clear. The snow from the night before had melted in the day's sun. When I pulled into the gravel parking area at 1:45 a.m. on December 13th, the air was perfectly still. No wind, no sound, just crystalline silence and a sky so full of stars it looked like someone had spilled diamonds across black silk. Jesus was already there, standing at the overlook, but this time he was facing me, waiting for me. And as I walked toward him, I saw that he was smiling, not the sad, grief-stricken expression of the previous nights, but genuine joy. "Welcome back, Jonathan," he said. "Are you ready for what comes next?" "I don't know," I admitted, coming to stand before him. "The last 3 nights have undone me. I'm not sure I can handle more. Tonight is different," he assured me. "Tonight I'm not showing you the problem anymore. Tonight I'm giving you the solution. Tonight I'm commissioning you to carry this message to a world that desperately needs it." He gestured to the overlook, and I followed him to the railing. The valley below was visible again in that supernatural way, the millions of lights spread out like a living map of humanity's restless striving. "Look," Jesus said, and he raised his hand. As he did, something remarkable happened. One light in the valley stopped moving, just stopped, became perfectly still, and immediately Jesus' attention focused on it with laser intensity. A beam of light, golden, warm, alive, shot from where we stood down to that single stopped light, and then another light stopped, and another, and another. Within moments, dozens of lights had ceased their frantic spinning, then hundreds, then thousands, and to each one Jesus sent that beam of connection, of presence, of transformative power. "This is what I'm calling you to," he said. "This is the movement I'm starting. Not a movement of doing more, but a movement of pausing long enough to receive what I'm offering, 60 seconds at a time, person by person, heart by heart." I watched in amazement as the lights continued to stop, one after another, creating pockets of stillness in the churning chaos. And wherever stillness appeared, Jesus reached in. "How?" I asked. "How do we actually make this happen? How do I teach people to do something so simple that it feels almost too easy?" Jesus turned to me, his eyes bright with purpose. "That's exactly why it works. It's simple. It's accessible. No one can say they don't have 60 seconds. No one can claim it's too complicated or requires special training. It's the most democratic spiritual practice imaginable, available to everyone, everywhere, right now." He moved away from the railing, and I followed him to the center of the overlook. Around us, the night seemed to be holding its breath. "Here's what I want you to tell them," Jesus said. "Here's the practical application. Here's how this actually works." He held up one finger. "First, they need to understand that this isn't about adding another spiritual discipline to their already overwhelming list. This isn't something else they have to do. This is about creating a crack in their armor of busyness. Just one crack, 60 seconds wide, through which I can finally reach them." A second finger. "Second, this needs to happen every day, not occasionally, not when they remember. Every single day, at roughly the same time if possible, they need to create this 60-second pause, Morning works best for most people, before the day's momentum sweeps them away. But whenever they can do it consistently, that's when. A third finger. Third, and this is crucial, Jonathan, those 60 seconds must be completely silent. No words, no prayers, no Bible reading, no worship music, no spiritual activity at all. Just silence, just stillness, just them sitting or standing or kneeling in my presence with absolutely no agenda. He lowered his hand. That's it. That's the whole instruction. 60 seconds, daily, in complete silence, with no agenda except to be present with me. I shook my head in disbelief. That's so simple. Exactly, Jesus said, which is why it's so hard. Silence terrifies people. Stillness exposes them. When they stop moving, stop talking, stop managing their image and their performance, that's when they have to face what's really going on inside. That's when they have to confront the exhaustion they've been denying, the doubt they've been suppressing, the emptiness they've been filling with activity. He began walking slowly around the overlook, and I walked with him. But here's what they need to understand. That confrontation is the beginning of healing. That exposure is the start of transformation. When they finally stop and realize how tired they are, how far they've drifted, how disconnected they've become, that's not failure, that's truth. And truth is always the foundation of freedom. We completed our circuit and stood at the overlook's edge again. Tell them what will happen, Jesus continued. Tell them what they can expect when they commit to this. He pointed to the valley, where those pockets of stillness continued to grow. The first few days will be uncomfortable. 60 seconds of silence will feel like an eternity. Their minds will race. They'll be tempted to fill the silence with words, with requests, with activity. They need to resist that. They need to sit in the discomfort and let me meet them there. After about a week, something will shift. The silence will become less threatening. They'll start to sense my presence in new ways, not dramatic necessarily, but real. A peace that settles over them, a clarity that emerges, a sense that they're not alone in the silence. After 2 weeks, they'll start noticing changes in their daily lives, less anxiety, more patience, better discernment. They'll find themselves hearing my voice more clearly throughout the day, not just in those 60 seconds, because they've created a habit of listening, a pattern of presence. And after 30 days, his voice grew intense. After 30 days of faithful, daily 60-second pauses, they'll look back and barely recognize who they were before. Because I'll have been working in those accumulated 30 minutes of stillness, just 30 minutes over a month, to do what years of frantic activity couldn't accomplish. He turned to me, taking both my shoulders. That's your challenge to issue, Jonathan. 30 days, 60 seconds a day. Starting today, December 13th, 2025, which means the deadline is January 12th, 2026. 30 days of committed practice. And I promise, I absolutely promise, that anyone who does this faithfully will experience transformation they can't even imagine right now. But I started to object, started to voice all the doubts I knew viewers would have. But nothing, Jesus interrupted gently but firmly. No excuses, no, I'm too busy, no, I'll start next week, no, I'm not sure I can do it right. There is no doing it right. There's only doing it. 60 seconds. Silence. Presence. That's it. He released my shoulders and spread his arms wide. Look at what's possible, Jonathan. I looked at the valley, and now more than half the lights had stopped. More than half had found stillness, and the transformation was visible even from this height. The frantic energy was calming. The chaotic patterns were settling into peace. This is what I'm offering, Jesus said, a church-wide awakening, a global movement of people returning to simple presence, a revolution against the tyranny of busyness, and it starts with 60 seconds. The eastern sky was beginning to lighten. This was it, the final sunrise, the end of the 4 nights. Now, Jesus said, his voice taking on a tone of authority I hadn't heard before, I need you to understand who this message is really for. Yes, it's for everyone. Yes, anyone can benefit. But there are specific people who are at breaking points right now, people who are one step away from walking away from faith, people who are so exhausted they can barely function. These are the ones I'm calling to most urgently. He began listing them, and as he spoke, faces appeared in the air around us, real people, real lives, real desperation. The pastor who woke up this morning and couldn't remember why he entered ministry in the first place. The mother who loves her children but feels nothing when she prays except obligation. The college student who's losing her faith because God feels distant and theoretical. The businessman who's achieved everything he set out to accomplish and feels emptier than ever. The worship leader who can't remember the last time she actually worshiped instead of performed. The missionary who's ready to quit because the loneliness and isolation have become unbearable. The retiree who spent 50 years serving faithfully and now wonders if any of it mattered. The teenager who's never known anything but religious activity and can't tell the difference between genuine faith and learned behavior. On and on the list went. Dozens of specific situations, specific struggles, specific souls teetering on the edge. These are my marked ones, Jesus said. These are the ones who were meant to find this message. And if they're reading this right now, if they're hearing these words, I want them to know, I see you. I know your exhaustion. I know your doubt. I know your confusion. And I'm not disappointed in you. I'm not angry with you. I'm reaching for you. And all I need is 60 seconds. 60 seconds of you stopping long enough for me to reach you. The sun broke the horizon, and the valley was suddenly flooded with golden light. The vision of the lights began to fade, but I could still sense the transformation that had occurred. Millions of hearts finding stillness, finding rest, finding Him. One last thing, Jesus said, as the mountaintop returned to its normal, physical reality. Tell them about the comments. Tell them I'll be moving through the comments section of this video. Tell them to write their commitment there, not for you, not for other viewers, but as an act of faith. I commit to 60 seconds of daily silence for 30 days, starting December 13th, 2025. Tell them to write that and then to come back in 30 days and report what I've done. He smiled then, and it was glorious. I'm going to do something extraordinary through this, Jonathan, something that will confound the wisdom of the wise and make the simple profound. I'm going to prove that the answer to the church's exhaustion isn't more programs, more activity, more striving. It's less. It's pause. It's presence. It's 60 seconds of pure, simple being with me. The sun was fully up now, and in the morning light I could see the mountaintop clearly, the weathered wood of the overlook, the twisted pine trees, the rocky ground, the stunning vista. It looked completely ordinary and completely sacred all at once. Thank you, I said, my voice breaking. Thank you for choosing me, for trusting me with this. Thank you for listening, Jesus replied. Now go. Share this message, and watch what I do. And then, for the final time, he was gone. I'm writing this now from my home office. It's been 6 hours since I left that mountaintop. I've barely moved from this chair, typing frantically to capture everything before the details fade. But they're not fading. If anything, they're becoming more vivid, more urgent, more essential. So here's what I'm asking you to do. Here's the practical challenge. Here's how you respond to what you've just read. Step 1. Commit right now. Before you do anything else, write in the comments. I commit to 60 seconds of daily silence for 30 days, starting December 13th, 2025. Not for me, not for other commenters. As an act of faith. As a declaration that you're willing to try something so simple it seems foolish, but that Jesus promises will be transformative. Step 2. Choose your time. Decide when you'll do your 60 seconds. Morning is best, before you check your phone, before you start your day, before the momentum of obligation sweeps you away. But whatever time you choose, commit to it. Same time every day for 30 days. Step 3. Set a timer. Literally, set a timer for 60 seconds, because 60 seconds of silence feels much longer than you think, and you need to know when it's actually over. Don't estimate, don't guess. Set the timer. Step 4. Be silent. When the timer starts, close your eyes, sit or stand or kneel, whatever feels right. And then do nothing. Say nothing, ask for nothing, just be present, just sit in the silence. Let your mind race if it needs to. Don't fight the thoughts. Don't try to empty your mind. Just be there, in the silence, with Jesus. That's it. That's the whole practice. Step 5. Be consistent. Every day. No matter what. Even when it feels pointless. Even when you don't sense anything happening. Even when you're tired or rushed or skeptical. 60 seconds. Every day. For 30 days. Step 6. Return and report. On January 12th, 2026, 30 days from now, come back to this video. Read through the comments and add your testimony. Tell us what Jesus did in those accumulated 30 minutes of silence. Tell us how you've changed. Tell us what you discovered about him, about yourself, about the power of simple presence. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. I know the objections that are rising in your mind. I already pray every day. Why do I need this? Because prayer and presence aren't the same thing. Prayer is talking, presence is being. You need both, but most of you have plenty of talking and almost no being. 60 seconds seems too short to matter. That's exactly why it works. It's short enough that you can't make excuses, but long enough, if you're truly still, for Jesus to reach you. Remember, he's not limited by time. He can do in 60 seconds what years of activity can't accomplish. What if I don't feel anything? Then you don't feel anything. This isn't about feelings. This is about faithfulness. This is about creating space, whether you feel anything in that space or not. Trust that Jesus is working even when you don't sense it. I'm too busy. I don't have time. That's a lie. Everyone has 60 seconds. Everyone. And if you truly believe you don't, then you're exactly the person who needs this most desperately. What if I miss a day? Then start again the next day. Don't let one missed day become an excuse to quit entirely. The goal is consistency, not perfection. Here's what I want you to understand. I'm not asking you to take my word for any of this. I'm not asking you to trust my experience. I'm asking you to try it yourself, to conduct your own 30-day experiment, to create 60 seconds of daily space and see what Jesus does with it. Because here's the truth. Either what I've shared over these 4 parts is real, or it's not. Either Jesus really is calling his people back to simple presence, or he's not. Either this practice will be transformative, or it won't. There's only one way to find out. 60 seconds. Starting today. For 30 days. That's it. That's the message. That's what Jesus woke me at 2:47 a.m. on December 10th, 2025 to deliver. Before I close, I need to say something to those of you who've read all 4 parts, who've stayed with me through 8,000 words of one man's encounter with Jesus on a mountaintop. You were meant to find this, not by accident, not by algorithm, not by coincidence. You were marked by Jesus himself to receive this message at this moment in your life. Maybe you're at a breaking point. Maybe you're exhausted. Maybe you're confused about why God feels distant. Maybe you're one step away from walking away from faith entirely. Or maybe you're fine. Maybe your life is good. Your faith is strong. Your practices are consistent. But there's still something, some small, quiet voice that whispers that there must be more. That whispers that you've been moving so fast, even in your faithfulness, that you've forgotten how to simply be. Whatever category you fall into, this message is for you. 60 seconds, daily, for 30 days. Starting December 13th, 2025, and ending January 12th, 2026. Will you do it? Will you take the challenge? Will you prove whether this is real or not? I know that if even a fraction of the people who see this message actually commit to this practice, we're going to witness a movement of the Holy Spirit unlike anything we've seen in our generation. Because Jesus is ready. He's been ready. He's been waiting for his people to stop long enough for him to reach them. 60 seconds. That's all the space he needs. I'm going back to that mountaintop next week. I feel called to return, to pray over everyone who commits to this challenge, to stand in that place where Jesus met me and intercede for the millions who will pause. And in 30 days, I'll create a follow-up video. I'll share testimonies from the comments. I'll talk about what God has done. I'll celebrate the transformation that I absolutely know is coming. But for now, the message is complete. The commission has been delivered. The challenge has been issued. The only question that remains is, will you accept it? Subscribe to this channel if you want to be part of this movement. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the follow-up. Share this video with everyone you know who needs to hear this message. And if you're honest, that's everyone you know, because we're all too busy, all too distracted, all too prone to mistake activity for relationship. Write your commitment in the comments. Choose your time, set your timer, and starting today, starting right now, pause. 60 seconds, just 60 seconds, and watch what Jesus does. He's waiting for you. He's been waiting for you. And he's promised me personally on that mountaintop under those stars with that wind howling around us, that anyone who faithfully commits to this practice will experience transformation beyond what they can imagine. Don't let this moment pass. Don't scroll away. Don't add this to your mental list of things to try someday. Pause now, right now, for 60 seconds. Close your eyes, set the timer, and let Jesus reach you. The mountaintop is calling. The message has been delivered. The movement is beginning. All that's left is for you to stop. Just stop. And in that stopping, in that pause, in that 60 seconds of sacred silence, everything changes. I'll see you in the comments. I'll see you in 30 days. I'll see you on the other side of the transformation that's about to unfold. May Jesus meet you in the silence the way he met me on that mountaintop. May 60 seconds become the crack through which his light floods into your life. May you discover, as I have, that the answer to exhaustion isn't doing more. It's pausing long enough to receive what he's been trying to give you all along. Grace and peace, beloved. The challenge is issued. The timer is set. The mountaintop awaits. Now pause. Just pause. And watch what he does.